Welcome back, friends. Anita Capri here, and we're continuing with the second season of Not Just Any Other Story. And I'm very pleased today to welcome my guest, Jordan. Welcome, Jordan.
Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure. Jordan is actually a good friend of our family, a very good friend of my son's, and he's also a mechanic. So there's a reason why I wanted Jordan in on this story today, because it's actually called The Mechanic. So, and you'll see why. So we're going to read halfway through the story. I guess we'll stop and we'll see what Jordan's perspective is on this. I'm really interested to hear what you have to say, Jordan. No pressure or anything. Anyway, here we go. The Mechanic. Gerald Ramble was a quiet sort of guy. He was tall, clean-cut, good-looking, and well-known to practically everyone in the small, God-fearing Midwestern town he'd called home all his 29 years. He was born there and grew up mowing lawns, delivering papers, and shoveling driveways in the winter for the folks whose patience for such things had long since been retired. He never really liked school, but he was good with his hands, gifted in fact, and he understood at an early age that this gift would be both his burden and his salvation. He'd worked at his father's gas station pumping gas and working on cars for as long as he could remember. It was 1990, and he had just turned 19 when his father died, the gentle hand of fate carrying him off one breezy summer afternoon. He'd been slumbering peacefully on his canvas hammock in the backyard, which was still swinging back and forth when Gerald found him lying in it, the remnants of a complacent smile on his lips. Overnight, Gerald felt the weight of the whole town descend upon him when he realized that the shop and station had become his responsibility. It was only after he was sure that his mother wouldn't cry herself to sleep any more that Gerald decided to move out of his childhood home and into the studio apartment above the gas station. He went to see his mother every Sunday without fail, like the good grown-up son everybody knew he was. She was the only person who still called him Gerald, since he'd adopted the more popular version of his name, Jerry. But if you weren't speaking directly to him, he was neither Gerald nor Jerry. One simply referred to him as the mechanic. People knew he was a hard-working mechanic and honest. Gerald wouldn't charge you a penny more than he had to, and never once did he take money for towing a car. And he didn't just fix cars. Gerald repaired bikes, tractors, and sometimes he would be called out of the shop to look at the odd household appliance. He could restore anything with a motor, and he was well respected for this by the men in town. Women liked the mechanic too, partly because he was so good-looking, and partly because his self-effacing manner exuded a mysterious charm. There were those members of the opposite sex who thought he was tormented by some dark, secret passion for which only they could be the sole cure. Whatever the case, they all came to see him, single, married, young, and middle-aged, sometimes carrying a tray of cookies, sometimes directly from the hairdresser. They came to get their cars fixed, often when there was nothing to be fixed at all. Gerald was acutely aware of this, and though it made him smile, he never seemed to show much of an interest in these prospective girlfriends or lovers. But there was one young lady for whom Gerald seemed to have an unaccustomed curiosity. She was the only one who didn't hide the fact that she liked to come to the garage just to stare at his finely sculpted face. When she came in to fill her car up with gas, Gerald would wait a minute before running out to help, so he could watch her through the shop window, her delicate fingers working the gas pump. It was not unusual to see her yellow Mustang parked just in front of the bay door behind which Gerald worked. On those occasions, one would find her sitting on an old crate or barrel, talking to Gerald, while he welded, hoisted, oiled, and bolted cars back together. She was Caprice Katsopoulos, whose Greek name was butchered by nearly every tongue in town, except for Gerald's. The first time he called her house to inform her that the service on her car was finished, he'd asked for Miss Katsopoulos and pronounced it perfectly. This impressed Caprice, and since then she seemed to be drawn to the mechanic. Gerald never told anyone about his secret affection for her. He might have told Kelvin Burns, his closest friend, but Kelvin had moved away to the big city the previous year, and Gerald only spoke to him on the phone every couple of months. Gerald thought about asking Caprice out, but never found the nerve to do so. He wondered if she were too young for him. At 19, she was an adult, old enough to do what she wanted. the same age he had been when his father had died, when he became a man. But for some reason, he felt much older than her. It didn't stop him from wanting her, or from noticing her generous curves, or the way in which she clapped her ankles together when she was looking up at the ceiling, dreaming about the future. Once she stood so close to him while he worked under the hood of the car that when he took a step back, he nearly knocked her over. He got to see close up the tiny beauty mark beside her right eye and the deep red highlights of her shiny dark hair. He thought she was beautiful, and he could have kissed her then, but he didn't. Caprice talked a lot about where she wanted to go and what she wanted to do in life as she sat on the big wooden barrel next to the car hoist. She would always check his reaction when she mentioned leaving the small town that was sucking the life out of her. Everyone always seemed to talk about leaving. Kelvin used to talk about it, and then finally he got his chance and left. Many of the friends Gerald knew growing up had gone as well, and he knew that it was just a matter of time before Caprice would join the rest of them. He, on the other hand, had no inkling to leave, and saw himself growing old there. One early, unusually warm September morning, as he sauntered into the diner to order his usual farmer's breakfast, it seemed as if every table was abuzz. There was news that Caprice Katsopoulos was gone. Everybody was talking about it. When Gerald overheard Ned and Mary Collins discussing it, he put his fork down and looked around at everyone in the diner, crooning unconsciously, as if he were trying to tune it all out. Caprice had just been into the shop the day before, and aside from the usual chatter, she had not mentioned she was planning to go anywhere soon. He felt something quite unfamiliar prick at his insides, and his throat suddenly became dry. She hadn't said goodbye or even asked him to go with her. Not that he would have gone. He just wished she would have asked. Gerald walked back to work that day, a heavy pulse in his gait, and that evening he closed the garage doors early. It was noticed by everyone who noticed such things in the way of small towns. So I'm going to stop there, Jordan.
Okay.
And I want to get your thoughts on a couple of things. I guess I was wondering if any of that rang true about him being from a small town and fixing everything in town.
Yeah, I would say that that kind of lines up. Like where I first started in the trade, it was a small corner shop in a small like a village of snowball corners, and we fixed everything, because if you can tune up a car, you could probably tune up a boat or fix a motorcycle or whatever was broken, and then everyone would come to see you.
Yeah.
And same as your everyone kind of come by and get together as the
Was it like the hub?
Yeah, there'll always be like the regulars come by to visit and hear about their day and what's going on.
So I call them old timers. The retired old timers meet at Tim Hortons or wherever. Did they used to come by and kind of have coffee? And
yeah, they'd come by like
I knew it.
The usual suspects.
Well, I knew this. So this must happen in all garages, because the garage where my husband and my son worked at, owned by his father, seemed to be the same type of thing. A lot of people would come by for a coffee and chit chat, and
yeah, good customer service. Also, like a small business. Whereas if it was like a big corporate owned thing,
right, very different.
They don't like that.
Yeah. So unless you come up with your Starbucks coffee and come up to the fancy offices.
Yeah.
So you pretty much can fix everything, Jordan.
I try to.
Yeah. And I think I mentioned to you before, your wife must love that.
Yeah, it's kind of handy being able to.
It is. It's handy. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I love it too, because my husband fixes most of the things in our house. Like there's some big things that of course you can't always do, but it's really, really handy.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to continue on with the mechanic. Thanks, Jordan, for your comments so far. And here we go with the next part. The next day, the new word out was that something suspicious had happened to Caprice Katsopoulos after they'd found her car abandoned not half an hour's drive away. According to the old-timers who had gathered at the garage for their early morning banter session, she'd left in a terrible rage following a huge blowout with her parents. Gerald listened to them while he turned on the coffee pot, and he pictured Caprice's face, angry and beautiful, running out to her car and peeling out of the gravel laneway from her house. He thought about this as he drove to his mother's place that Sunday afternoon, and when he got there, she relayed her version of the story, the one she'd heard through her usual web of gossip. Apparently, Caprice had found a job working as a bar waitress in the city, and it did not go over well with her very conservative, church-going parents. Not only did they refuse to give her their blessing, but they made it clear that they wouldn't fork over 1 red cent to help her out. She'd left shortly after dark. Her car was discovered just off the shoulder of the 2-lane highway that led precariously out of town. Now police were investigating because Caprice Katsopoulos was nowhere to be found. Gerald sat in silence as his mother's voice droned on, explaining every theory she had concerning the girl's disappearance. But he really didn't hear a word she was saying. All he could hear was his own voice in his own head asking the same question over and over again. "Caprice, where are you?" To say that things got out of hand would not do justice to the enormity of the events that followed. It was as if a terrible storm that had been hovering tenaciously over the town had finally decided to unleash itself, wild and untamable in its fury. First there was the abandoned car, then the traces of blood found in it, and finally the media frenzy that placed every acquaintance of Caprice Katsopoulos on the list of possible suspects linked to her disappearance or kidnapping. And right there at the top of that list was the name of Gerald, or Jerry Ramble, the name that was whispered by the missing girl's friends who'd watched her drive in and out of the parking lot of the mechanic's garage. It was whispered by the town folk, too, the ones who'd known him since he was a baby, the ones who'd known his father and his mother, who'd had their cars repaired over the decades at the shop, the ones whose driveways he'd shoveled and whose lawns he'd mowed when he was just a kid. All of them. It was repeated over and over again on every news station, local and national. Gerald Ramble, suspect, boyfriend, possible murderer, rapist, loner, psychopath. Investigators used everything in their arsenal to fill the void of unanswered questions. There was no body, no weapon, no witnesses, not one piece of evidence to explain where Caprice Katsopoulos was, except for the fingerprints that were all over her car. The mechanic's fingerprints. It didn't matter that Gerald had worked on her car just the week before, and many times before that. Then there was the cell phone call she'd made to him the night before she left. He had no idea she had called because he had closed the shop early that day, and the answering machine had picked up a blank message. It didn't matter, though, that Gerald had not known any of this. He was connected to her, however briefly and however distant, and that was all that seemed to matter. They drilled him about everything, every encounter, every conversation, and every intricate detail concerning him and Caprice and their, quote, relationship. They treated him like a criminal, but this wasn't what bothered him the most. More than all of the accusations, spoken and unspoken, that spread through the town, more than every disgusting name he'd been called on television, in cafes and barbershops across the nation, what bothered the mechanic the most was having every moment and every word he'd ever had with Caprice pulled out of him and examined like some horrible, dirty thing. Gerald stopped going to the diner to eat his breakfast because people would halt their conversations as soon as he'd walk in and stare at him. He stopped going to the general store to buy his favorite gum. He stopped opening the garage and turning on the gas pumps because no one came to get their cars fixed. No one came to get gassed. None of the women who'd found an excuse to see him before found an excuse now. And none of the men whose cars and trucks were in dire need of repair would risk being associated with the mechanic. He even avoided going to his mother's house on Sunday for fear that she would face the wrath of the media and the neighbors. Gerald Ramble waited, not for the news that Caprice Katsopoulos' body was found, but for the ominous knock on his door that would place the final stamp of guilt on him, the knock that would lead to handcuffs, a trial, and the end of his life as he knew it. He never once thought of leaving. Even now, as he pictured the faces of all the people that had in the past turned to him for help, or assurance, or a smile, the very same ones who now turned on him, Gerald wondered how it was that people were so fickle, like the cat at his mother's house, 1 minute purring and playful, and the next swiping its paw at him. It had been 9 days since the mechanic's life had been turned over to the scrutiny of the town and the whole country when that knock finally came. At first, Gerald thought it was the detectives who'd been watching him night after night since the girl's disappearance, but it was very late and he knew they would be asleep in their cars. And the knock was too soft, perhaps a reporter, he thought to himself, but the cameras and trucks that had parked out front had left hours earlier. When he opened the door, it was Caprice Katsopoulos who was standing there, her eyes wide and desperate, her mouth partly open as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. Gerald stood there staring, not knowing exactly what to do, as his gaze rested on the tiny beauty mark beside her eye. She didn't wait for him to invite her in. She took a step forward so that she was just inches away from him. He did not move. He did not smile or talk or feel. There was nothing left. He just stood there silent as she wrapped her cold arms around his body, her head resting against his warm chest just below his chin. "Jerry," she said after a minute had passed, now stepping away from him, "aren't you going to say anything?" Gerald thought about it for a moment and wondered if he could say anything at all. Sure, he was relieved that she was all right, that she was alive, but he seemed to know this all along. The words did not come. Is this what it feels like to be in shock, he thought. Caprice, who was still holding him at arm's length, gave him a shake. "Don't you care about where I've been?" she asked, her voice now trembling with impatience. Gerald nodded yes, as if to prolong the moment before the moment of truth. He walked calmly over to the refrigerator and took 2 sodas out. When he offered her one, she knocked it out of his hand, and the brownish foam fizzled up and then across the wood floor. "I don't want a soda. What's wrong with you?" she screamed in his face. "I'm back. I came back." Her eyes were ablaze now, and when he didn't respond, she turned around and put her hand on the doorknob. With her back still to him, her head down, she began to explain. "I didn't want to, you know. I didn't want to come back. I heard what they were saying about you. I thought it would all blow over." She paused for a moment, perhaps to give him the opportunity to say something, but he didn't. "I really wanted to make my parents worry about me. I wanted them to feel guilty. But I never thought—" She swung around to face him once again. "I came back as soon as I realized—" Her voice was pleading but resentful. "I came back for you, so they would know I wasn't kidnapped or killed or whatever, so they would know you're innocent." Gerald wondered why he didn't feel thankful. He wondered why he didn't feel the least bit of gratitude that she'd come back just to clear his name. He felt he had inconvenienced her, that he had ruined her plans, her chance to get out of this dumpy town, as she had always called it. When he finally found his voice, the only thing he could think of saying to her was, "Thank you." "Thank you?" She repeated his words as if they were a joke. "That's it?" she asked, her hand resting now on her hip. She has lovely hips, Gerald thought, and just as quickly as it entered his mind, it fled. When Caprice Katsopoulos slammed the door behind her and stomped down the back steps that led from his apartment door, Gerald gave a start. He hadn't expected her to get so mad, to be so mad at him. He hadn't expected to see her at all, and he hadn't expected to feel so very, very empty inside when she left him standing there, looking down at the dark liquid that was moving its way across the floor, trying to reach him, much in the same way Caprice Katsopoulos had tried to reach him. Both had been unsuccessful, because Gerald Rambo was now unreachable. It was well past midnight by the time the mechanic had gone to bed. He turned all the lights out and unplugged the phone, which he had anticipated would be ringing off the hook soon enough. Then something strange seemed to happen to him. When he closed his eyes, his heart began pounding violently in his chest, and his mind started to fill up with things, images, names, memories, faces. One after the other, over and over again, he saw them and pondered them all. He felt an incredible, uncontrollable anger rise within him, and then suddenly an all-consuming sadness. He cried as he lay there, and then smiled, and then cried again as he thought about his life, his past, his father lying in his hammock, and his mother sitting out on her front porch petting the cat. He thought about his work and the gas station and the future. Then he thought about Caprice Katsopoulos and her beautiful, raging face when she'd accused him of whatever it was that he'd done. When it was clear that there would be no sleep that night, he quickly scrambled out of bed, got dressed, pulled his coveralls over his clothes, and raced down the back stairs to the garage. He worked all night long and into the next day, and into the next, barely eating or sleeping, ignoring the people who banged on the garage door with their cameras and microphones. He even ignored his own mother, who had come to see what Gerald was doing. He worked and worked and worked, and on the third day he stopped just as the sun had reached the other side of the horizon. He felt relieved and a little scared. When he started the 1968 Charger, the rumble of the engine made him think of his father, who'd sat him on the hood of an old hot rod when he was just 5 or 6 years old. He'd started it up and then revved the engine. Gerald's eyes had opened wide with wonder and awe, and his father had grinned at him. Gerald was grinning now as he remembered his father's face, the smell of the motor, and the sound of what skilled hands could do, and he felt something awaken in him, something that had been idle for too long. He'd bought the car a few years back and had paid $10,000 for it, his life savings at the time. No one knew he had it, and if anyone had known, they'd forgotten about it by now. He'd labored over it in secret, slowly and meticulously, and kept it covered up in the far bay that was separated by a brick wall from the one he'd always worked in. Someday, he thought, I'll finish it, but there was never a good reason to until now. He drove the car out through the bay door and into the parking lot, and it shimmered like a mirage in the sunlight. He drove down the street and recognized some boys riding on their bikes. He looked at them and smiled, and looked at their bikes he had fixed, whose tires he'd pumped up, whose handlebars he'd adjusted. They followed him, calling out to him, admiring his treasure. He drove by the diner and the general store, the bank and the post office, and people inside and out stopped to watch as he glided through town, his sunglasses hiding the pride that gleamed in his eyes. He drove slowly by his mother's house, and she was sitting on the front porch in her favorite chair. When she saw him, she stood up and leaned forward against the white railing. Just as she was about to call his name, Gerald looked up at his mother and smiled. She stopped herself, though, and stared, her heart filling with love for him. She nodded, as if to acknowledge his triumph, and raised her arm to wave at him, smiling back, knowing that it was all that was needed. Caprice Katsopoulos didn't see the mechanic or his car that day, but heard about it later on. She thought it ironic that she was the one now left to wonder where he'd gone or exactly why. She knew that she would probably never know, and she felt as if something had been left unfinished between them, because he never seemed to want to know her story, none of it. He never knew, for instance, that Caprice had tried to call him when her car ran out of gas that fateful night, and when he hadn't answered, she'd been so angry she'd smashed her fist against the dash, blood dripping from the gash in her hand, a gash that had bled onto the upholstered seats. He never knew that she'd hitched a ride with a group of youngsters much like herself, youngsters who were searching for something better. If he had known this, surely he would have thought of his father, who would have called them all hippies. He never knew, when she finally heard the news about herself and about Gerald, she'd hesitated, that she could have called right away, but she didn't, that she could have gone to the police, but didn't, that she could have hitched a ride back home or taken a bus, but she didn't. She'd waited, and for that decision her life had taken a different path, one that she would always nod her head and wonder about. As for the mechanic, when he reached the edge of town, the smell of worn leather and gasoline filling his nostrils, he couldn't help but notice the familiar sign on the other side of the road. Its blue paint faded and chipped, the letters welcoming visitors to the friendliest place on earth, now worn and barely visible. He passed it, not bothering to look back, nor to read the words on it one last time, but found himself instead looking straight ahead and off into the distance, where an unassuming, clear stretch of road met a fiery red-orange sky. The end. So, okay, so I'm just going to pause here for a second, and I think I need to ask you some questions. So this whole her going missing and the town turning on him,
People are quick to assume the worst in everything.
Yeah.
It's kind of human nature. They'll forget the 1,000 good deeds you did and just dwell on the one bad thing or the one potential bad thing that you've done, and then they'll just stick with that.
Yeah, and you know what? Even being in education, I remember all of the things that I used to do, all of the great things that we used to do in schools, and all of the great parents I used to talk to. You remember the one nasty thing or negative thing that somebody said to you the most,
Oh yeah,
right? Like
Mhm.
it's so, and you're teaching
I am.
in a high school.
Yeah.
How are you? It must be a bit different to be in that situation because you're teaching in a shop.
Yes.
So it's not exactly the same as a classroom, but do you actually get parent calls and things like that?
Yes, it's more so I'm finding me reaching out to parents versus the opposite.
Oh, okay.
Um,
What do you reach out about?
if like lack of student success
Okay.
or attendance issues
Yeah.
or productivity,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's even like kids, kids are quick to kind of like other each other, like, oh, that's the kid that did the weird thing, and then like you could never live that down.
Yeah.
So just like
So it's the same thing. People think when you grow up, it stops, but I think adults can sometimes be even more judgmental. I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know. It depends, I know, on the situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, well, that's interesting because I remember, I mean, I taught for a long time. I taught for 20 years. And it was only the last few years where I found that the parent calls coming my way, like to me with questions and concerns, were just got more and more numerous as opposed to me.
reaching out.
Yeah, it's just it's changed, and I think now it's changed even more since I've been retired. So, but anyway, getting back to the story.
Yep.
Any thoughts about just the story in general, the characters, or anything that you want to share or have a perspective on?
And he kind of
The girl.
the girl that went missing.
Yeah.
And whatnot. I feel like once he kind of saw like all of her true colors, he realized like this, like there's some red flags here.
Yeah.
And just steer clear.
Yeah,
Because sure we've all seen someone we know who's kind of
yeah,
stuck with someone who's been a little crazier, and like you see like the hell they go through.
yeah,
Like and he's just like, I don't have time for that.
yeah,
Once he figures out that she was just trying to be attention seeking,
yeah. That's exactly.
and
And I mean, she basically held his life in
Yeah.
her hands. Like, what was going to happen? What if she never would have come back for years?
or if it went to trial, a jury of his peers who like in his town, they've
Yeah.
already condemned
Seen
him as
him, yeah.
guilty,
Yeah,
and how to get a fair trial in a
Right.
small town.
right. Why do you think she was so mad when she left?
Um,
Remember when she just kind of threw the pop and she's like,
I think she was maybe still looking for the attention, or she
Yeah.
was she was trying to be like the centerpiece of the story,
yeah,
and he wasn't giving it to her.
no. And he didn't even ask her what happened. I
Yeah.
think that really enraged her. Like,
Mhm.
it's interesting yeah, that's exactly sort of what my intention was, but I always like to hear what people think because sometimes people get a different impression of what I intended for that character. And it's a new thing like that I never thought of. You know what I mean? And the end, Jordan, like when he leaves. Okay, first of all, I have a question about accuracy.
Okay.
So, number one, were there orange? Was it a Corvette that I?
You said
Or no, hers was yellow, a yellow Corvette. Were there yellow Corvettes?
Yeah.
Okay, just double checking.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I said the color of the Charger. Did I?
I don't
No.
recall. I just remember like the sunset.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah,
that sounds like a pretty accurate, like
yeah.
younger male, like textbook muscle car to
Was
just,
it? Was it a textbook muscle car?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because I don't even know. This story was written like so long ago. I'm trying to remember where I got the idea to like use that car.
Okay.
Maybe that's not what Brandon has, is it?
No,
Does he have that old one?
he's a Dart.
Oh, a Dodge Dart. That's
Like
right.
the car you're talking about is kind of like the Dukes of Hazzard's car.
Oh, okay. Thanks for explaining that. I probably knew that at some point. I forgot because it was written so long. I probably asked Brandon or Wayne or something about what kind of car was a hot rod at the time. So this would have been in the 90s. He paid $10,000 for it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's accurate?
Then yeah, now they just keep going up because they
Did
don't.
they really?
Oh yeah, because they aren't making them anymore, and so people leave them in the field. They just rust away and rot. So that's one less left.
Yeah.
Or they get an accident and they're not making new 1960 anything,
Okay. Yeah.
and they just kind of, and it's like a textbook muscle car. So everyone wants one. So the
Yeah.
demand's there,
Okay.
and
Got it.
they're not cheap.
No. Do you like muscle cars?
Yeah.
Do you have any?
No, just
If you could have any old car you wanted, what would you pick?
Right now I'm kind of into old trucks.
Oh,
So like
okay.
50s, 60s
Okay.
trucks.
Yeah, like what?
Um, like when I grew up, my grandpa, he's got a 1956 Ford F100.
No way.
So like
He
there's like,
still has it.
yeah, so he had that like restored in like the early 90s.
Yeah.
So there's pictures of me like 3 years old on his lap holding the steering wheel going down the road.
No way.
So like lots of good memories of that.
Do you think he'll leave it to you?
I don't know. If he,
Does he first of all, is it drivable?
yeah, it's still drivable.
Holy cow.
So it was restored to be like an original condition. So it's bright red with the white wall tires.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I mean, if that's what you like, then,
Mhm.
but it's quite the industry. And I only know this because now there are so many shows on television about restoring these old cars and these treasure hunters that are going and finding all of these beat up things and
Yeah.
feels like you said.
Mhm.
Like, I think a lot of it's in the States, but I think it's here too.
If you go west, if you go like Saskatchewan and
Okay.
Alberta, where they don't put salt in the roads, all
They
their
don't put salt in the roads in Saskatchewan? Really?
they use sand and whatnot, so
Oh.
their vehicles don't rot out like they do in Ontario.
Okay. Why do we use so much salt?
Taxpayers like bare roads.
Oh,
So like in the wintertime, if I'm paying all this money in taxes, I want to see pavement.
yeah, that's what I
Whereas
figured.
if you go to
And there's a lot more people here and a lot more people commuting too, right? Like,
yeah, so if you go further west, they'll just like you might not see bare pavement for weeks on end. They'll just like the snow will pack down and they'll just
Yeah.
put sand or really fine gravel down for traction
okay,
and then drive accordingly.
okay.
And people and
Have you been there in the winter?
I haven't.
Okay.
I've talked to people who have.
Yeah. We have a friend who also lives there, and I would not want to live there though. It's too cold. Anyway, any other final thoughts before we conclude about the story or
Um,
the accuracy, or do you have any questions for me?
I don't really have any questions, but I think it all kind of got cleared up.
Yeah. Where do you think he's going? Where do you think Jerry's going? Do you think he'll come back, or is he just going for the day, or what's your thought?
My guess is that he's pretty established.
Yeah.
Like he would probably come back.
Yeah.
Because like his whole life is there.
Yeah.
But maybe he just kind of got to go on a little
Yeah.
journey and like clear his mind. Or
Yeah.
if you come back in a week and it's all blown over and people try to act like it never happened,
Yeah.
and if that's something he actually wants to like deal with it because he knows everyone is just waiting for one bad thing to happen, they're going to flip on him again.
Yeah. You're half right.
Okay.
Well, I don't say what it is, so you're not really right or wrong. But
Okay.
my intention was that he would. When I first wrote this, it was he's gone. He's dumping the small heap, just like his friends. That's why I made a point of mentioning like that they'd left.
Mhm.
And then when I reread it years later, I'm like, you know what? No, like he's going to leave, but he's going to leave for a while. Like it's not going to be a week or 2 weeks. It could be like a year, 2 years,
Hmm.
and then he's going to come back
Okay.
because that can be part 2.
Yeah.
What happens when he comes back? Yeah. Anyway, well, I hope you enjoyed that story.
It was good.
I know that I read the whole thing, but yeah, I think I might have to write part 2.
Okay.
I never thought of this before, actually. I thought of it years ago, but I don't know. Maybe I will write part 2.
I feel like there's no inaccuracies there.
Yeah, I'm glad because I always wonder that about when I'm doing something like
that stuff like
about
kind of
trade.
drives me crazy. Like if you watch a show, like if you watch Yellowstone and you see them drive by in a truck and
Yeah.
the audio they put in, like that's a diesel truck going by.
No
And then the audio
way.
doesn't line up, or you see a movie when they're on a motorcycle and you hear them shifting gears.
Yeah.
Like, they don't make a 12-speed motorcycle, but it sounds cool for like
The movie.
yeah. So like
I would never notice anything like that.
so you kind of have to like actively suspend your reality to try to buy into it.
See, you should be a consultant for these
Oh,
any of these movies with cars, and you know what? In fact, the other day we were watching Yellowstone, and Wayne said, "Oh, look, they've got a Ford and not a Dodge because they were using Dodges through
yeah,
most of the season, and this last season there was a different kind of truck."
yeah,
So he was wondering about that. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe they got a different contract.
oh, yeah, maybe.
Anyway, okay, well, I think we're going to end it there. And I really want to thank you so much for your perspective, Jordan, and for the information. I feel like I know a little bit more now about cars.
Okay.
So I appreciate it. So thanks so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. I look forward to part 2.
Okay. Well, I'll let you know when it's written.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, listeners, please make sure that you like the story or comment and subscribe and follow me so that we can make sure that we get more listeners hearing this, and share, please. And I guess we will tune in next time with our next story. Take care.